Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks Podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it also gets uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, while going up on various different podcasting platforms. Today, I'm with my co-host, Teddy, and we're going to be talking about the BT13 meta, its current developments based on some of the early tournament results, because we got a lot of tournaments to talk about, and our general overall impressions on, well, its early development. So, yeah, we had, 3 events happen pretty much almost back-to-back in different territories?
Technically 4 if you're counting the Win-A-Box, or was it Win-A-Case? I don't remember. One of those tournaments that I think Eggman hosted. Or PBG.
It was
Eggman,
PBG, and I don't think we have that data.
No, we don't. But
Yeah,
that did happen.
Yes. PBGs happened on Saturday, July 29th? Yeah.
The tournament, the regional happened there.
And then their Win-A-Box or Win-A-Case was on the 30th, but we're not going to be talking about that because we don't have the data. Then we had the Nest Regional, and we had the TAC Regional. So just a lot of high-level events. So we're going to start off with TAC, and the TAC data isn't going to really be anything we weren't kind of expecting. So, just to preface this, we kind of already made our own meta predictions. We knew Shine was going to be a pretty dominating force, and then we kind of knew that a lot of the rest of the decks kind of didn't seem like they were going to change in terms of their overall, representation in terms of strength. So there's just a lot of, decent tournament contenders, which is always nice. So going over the top 16 breakdown, there was 5 Shines, 2 Gaios, 2 Greymon Tribals. I think at this point, just because there's 4 different Greymon variants, Greymon Tribal is just a good way to sum it up. Most of the time, it's going to either be Black War or War Grey. We do have some data that has Greymon Pile, where it doesn't matter. You're just using level 6 Greymon goodness. So those are the 3 main variants. Technically there's 4 with Gaio, but that's probably the least popular of the variants. But regardless, we have 2 Bloom, 2 Red Hybrid, 1 Alphamon, 1 Royal Knights, and 1 Machine Dramon. Remember, this is for the TAC Regional. The top 16, in terms of first to 16th, goes as following: Shine Gray, followed by Shine Gray, followed by Mirage, followed by Greymon Tribal, Black War Greymon specifically, Bloom Lord, then Red Hybrid, Alphamon, Mirage again, Shine, Bloom Lord, Greymon Tribal. This time it's specifically more War Grey focused. Then
I don't want to cut you off, but the screen is upside down for you.
Oh, yeah. I totally... Yeah, so I do, Spotify does have a video podcast, so I do upload this technically as a video onto Spotify, so I do apologize for that. So I'll just move it to cover Teddy instead of me.
That's okay.
Sorry, Teddy.
Hey, you're all good.
But yeah, so Royal Knights was 12th, then Machine Dramon, Shine, and Hybrids. So that's 9 different decks, which is a really good start considering between BT12 and EX4, we realistically only had about 13 meta playable decks, which is not a lot compared to most of the other metas. Because coming from BT11, we had 20 playable decks. So
stark contrast.
Yeah. So BT12 and EX4 were not super diverse, even though compared to a lot of other games, 13 decks is still kind of diverse. But the big standout out of this first early initial impression is the fact that Alphamon was able to sneak in. I think Alphamon is an absolutely fantastic deck. It's always nice to see him come back. The new inclusion of a new Doru, Doru Greymon, lets you use the deck stuff again, and the deck stuff with Cool Boy was absolutely cracked the first time around. So it just, hey, it's still good.
Yeah, if it isn't broke, don't fix, and it does basically all the same stuff. It still gives you the protection from the level 5. It's just not as good as the other one. But, I mean, you still have the other one, but it's limited to 1, so
yeah, and then
you don't see it as much.
And then they did start teching in Sunarizamon to try to make up for the damage. So that they are adjusting to try to make it as strong as it once was. Plus the new Alphamon just literally turning off attacks, combine that with Congo, and then you literally turn off all attacks. It like except for Digimon with the play cost of 8, which
8 and 9.
Yeah,
that's your only 9. 2 choices. So many of those running around.
Yeah. So, like that's basically limiting them to attacking with strong level 5s. And if you're in an Alphamon, he's most likely going to have blocker, and that level 5 isn't realistically going to be able to do anything.
So it's like it's quite a strong deck. I got the privilege to play it at a local not too long ago. I played it twice. The first time it did not do me well, but the second time I did do very well with it, and I was quite happy with it. I got second place at the local with about 20 something players. So I was pretty happy with it. The deck is quite good. I mean, you shut out a lot of stuff. Like Congo automatically turns off all the Greymon stuff. Same with the Mirage Gal. Same with Black War. I mean, essentially, if it has a boss monster, Congo plus him, they're not attacking for the most part. They basically have to just set up, pass turn, and most of the time, if that happens, you're about to clap back and hurt them really bad.
Yeah, the other newcomers in the TAC regional that made top 16 was obviously Shine. People look at the 5 shines and they'll be like, oh my god, that's a lot of shines. And I'm like, well, it kind of is, but it is going to be the most played deck this format. So it only makes sense that it has the highest opportunity to have the highest amount of representation because of how many people are on it. Then we have Mirage, which is another new BT13 deck. I think that deck is absolutely fire after playing it. I do think that it needs the correct type of pilot, and it is a glass cannon style of deck, so there are some matchups you kind of do just lose to, but that's the risk you take taking that style of deck. Otherwise, I think it is probably one of the better blue decks because it's doing all your classic blue things. I'm going to bounce the opponent's stuff, and then I'm going to attack quite a lot. You do have some protections. They're not insane, but I think like the biggest appeal was the I can't be redirected on the BT13
Massive.
mock. That otherwise, like, you look at that type of a matchup against Machinedramon, and it's borderline unwinnable, but that single card alone turns an unwinnable matchup into something that's actually doable, which is...
almost free, to be honest. Almost free.
Not exactly almost free, depending on the stack of Machinedramon, which is, like, taking advantage of the inconsistencies within Machinedramon. If they don't have a good Machinedramon stack, like, then it becomes so much easier. But if they do have a good Machinedramon stack, it still can be significantly hard. But outside of that, and Royal Knights was the last newcomer, which we kind of knew because it's D-Reaper 2.0 almost verbatim in terms of how it plays. You're just going to play a body, shove it underneath, and then wait until you have your Omnimon, or like Omnimon is the equivalent of D-Reaper's Reaper, and then you just hard play that card for like next to nothing or actually nothing, and then you just kind of win the game from there. Like it is almost the exact same in terms of the type of style of deck it is. It is pure combo control. And then outside of that, everything we kind of already had. We've had Greymon, we've had Bloomlord, we've had Red Hybrids, we had Machine German. Like, they're all just still good, solid decks.
And I don't think that's going to change. I mean, I don't think any of the decks that were good last meta are bad now. I think they're perfectly fine. Hunters and all these other decks that were doing well before, I think will still do good now. So I don't think we're in a point where Shine Gray and these new decks just outright overshadow them. I don't think that's true at all. I think we're in a pretty good spot where I think a lot of decks have a chance to shine that aren't Shine Gray mod. Pun, I get it.
Yes. And then this kind of brings me up to the next event with the PPG regional, the North American regional, where we kind of see a lot of the same decks, except we still see some old decks from BT12 EX4 creep in. So out of their top 16, this was the largest event so far. We had 3 Hunters, 3 Royal Knights, 3 Shine, 2 Bloomlord, 1 Belphemon, 1 Black War Greymon, or Greymon Tribal, Black War Greymon more specific, 1 Blue Flare, 1 Ulforce, and 1 Alphamon. So even though Mirage didn't top, the fact that you still had a deck like Ulforce, which is another bounce aggro deck where I'm just going to bounce your stuff and then swing multiple times, kind of pseudo combo heavy, kind of not. Like, it's filling that same type of void, so like it's nice to see that strategy, through the different lenses that it's played through, can still make it into the top slots. And then Shine didn't have as huge of a like top 16 representation this time around. But that's because, like, I actually think, and looking at some of the data that we'll go over later, a lot of these matchups are closer to the 50-50 mark, which shows that it's actually a pretty good format, that a lot of decks have plenty of opportunity to be able to win. It's just what their string of matchups is against kind of could determine their overall success.
I think that and a good pilot, I think, will matter more now than all of that, because I think there's a lot of things that have to go right. Like, for example, Ulforce. This Ulforce doing well. There are some things that has to go right. It can't see anything with Quartzmon or anything like that. And then if they get lucky with their matchups and they pilot the deck good, I think they pretty solid, and they don't have much of a... I mean, it's still Ulforce at the end of the day, where you just straight up OTK them without them even really getting a chance.
I mean, yeah. Because going over the top 16, starting from first going to 16th, we had first place was Belphemon, second place was Hunters, third was Royal Knights, fourth was Shine, fifth was the Black War Greymon, then we had Blue Flares, Hunters, Shine, Bloomlord, Royal Knights, Ulforce, Alpha, Shine, Hunters, and Bloomlord. And, like, being a good pilot definitely is really, really huge in this format, because this is going to be like my spicy hot take and spicy bit of salt. But I played against, in the tournament, the first place Belphemon player. He only got into that position, one, because he played really well and he understood his deck, and two, I was in the winning position. I could have won that match, but I was not fully aware of the capabilities of his cards yet, so I made a couple of misplays, and that ended up costing me the game. But had I actually played more optimally, I would have beaten him, locking him out of where he currently was, and that would have changed the tournament dramatically. But salty bit aside, because I'm still learning the Gao deck and its matchups and learning the meta, that's always the exciting thing about, like, jumping into a tournament with very little expectations on the meta itself. And that's where practice and being a more seasoned player comes in handy. But outside of that, I don't think there was any, like, huge upsets. I think a lot of people were still kind of surprised that Hunters was floating around, and it did as well as it did. And then obviously the big upset was Belphemon. I always think, like,
I don't think it was an upset. I think Belphemon is a very, very good deck, but requires a very, very potent pilot.
Yeah, I think that's just true with literally any purple deck. Like, purple usually is a very hard color to pilot in general, at least in my perspective. And, like, a good purple player will generally almost always manage to make it into the top slots because they are a good purple player and they understand not only the capabilities of their deck, but the different style of resources that you're playing with compared to everyone else.
And I like his list a lot. The Nidhogg Mons, all that. Like I love all this. I love his list. Uh, this is, I mean, I played the same deck at the event.
Yeah, I
Um,
think his list was a little bit greedier compared to like a standardized list. Um,
yeah, the Nidhoggs plus the like the one-offs like Omnimon and going 3 Gizmon XT. I mean, yeah, I think also having less rookies,
he
4-4. I
he
mean,
said
that's
in
normal. 11
Yeah, he said
makes
in his
sense.
profile that Zwart probably was not needed and could have been cut very easily. I think like the only reason for Zwart is more of
Asked
the
him on play.
idea. Well, it's more of the idea of it where it's just like it's the only level 7, so you can discard it off of Gift of Darkness to actually delete a level 7. Otherwise, like their level 7s are going to be sticking a lot until they see Gift in their hand rather than from security. Plus, if you're like dry on cards, you could use Omnimon Swart as like an extender. So it's not bad. He just made the comment that like if I were to change the deck, I would take Zwart out. So that is a
I agree.
sentiment from
I,
a more seasoned purple player.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's not a necessary card. It's fun. It's cheeky when it works because then you just play like Astamon, then play the Gizamon AT, delete the Gizamon or use the Gizamon AT, draw 2, trash 2, use Asta, pop the Gizu to play the level 5, then Asta evolves into another sleep. Like the combos go absurd when they do. This is that card is just a super win more card. It's also hilarious if you go like sleep mode, get the protection, then go into Omnimon Zwart, then use the same combo to then set up a second sleep that another unaffected body. There's crazy plays you can do with it, but you definitely don't need it to do what the deck wants to do. It is absolutely unnecessary, but I like the list a lot. I do think it's a little bit greedy, but sometimes you got to be greedy, and it paid off for him.
Well, I mean, so part of it goes into like this is why deck building and like techs are very, very, very important because he's running 3 Psychmon and Psychmon single handedly won him the game in finals against Royal Knights because if we take a look at the Royal Knights players list, you will notice a distinct lack of something, and that is actual removal for small bodies. Like because
Just Marcus.
yeah, it's
That's
literally
literally
two
it.
copies of Marcus. So
Oh,
there's
he
a,
has got Porcupamon too, actually.
I mean,
But
there,
it's 2 copies of Porcupa, 2 copies of Marcus. How often are you going to see that in a 50 card deck? Not that high.
especially since the deck doesn't have insane levels of draw because it just needs to stall long enough for Omnimon, and a lot of these cards are just like stall cards. Like they're not actually actively doing anything but trying to stall out the game,
Ooh.
and that's why he's running more cards like Congo. Because as we mentioned before, Alpha Congo could just literally stop somebody from attacking for the turn period. But the distinct lack of removal in terms of like cheap and effective ways outside of the Marcus and the Porcupa, and it's only 2 copies of each, like that is part of the reason why he lost is because he didn't tech in more answers for small body removal. Yes, it would have affected the deck's consistency, but at the end of the day, if you can't play the game, you can't play
Doesn't
the
matter,
game.
yeah.
Yeah, your consistency doesn't matter. You functionally cannot play the game,
I was
and
like,
that's why
could
like
be.
yeah, that's why a card like Psychmon and these floodgates are going to be so important, and they're probably going to have more prominence in the meta going forward, knowing that Royal Knights is one of the top 5 decks in the format.
Yeah, I mean, now you could be the strongest deck in the game, but if you can't get your game plan going, it doesn't matter what you can do.
Yeah,
So I see that, and I like. I mean, this list, by the way, is super greedy. By the way, like this is a crazy list. Like using 3 Congos, Jasmine GX, second Mepa. I know people were
Yeah,
kind of
people
talking about that, but
Yeah,
like,
people were talking about his misplays on second Meppa because it is a Royal Knights traded option, but the
you
way
don't
that
gain the memory
Yggdrasil works is on the delay based cards where they're
when they're
physically
placed
yes, they are
in the battle
placed
area.
on the battle area. It's not just a use, it's a place. So there
Yeah,
was
yeah.
some questioning into that, which is why I've seen some Royal Knights list run heavier on the Marcus, A, because of the removal, and B, because it gives you access to red options for, more removal. And then they also were running the.
Man, this guy was running Cranium on. BT3 Cranium on. This guy's crazy, bro. I like this guy.
Was he? Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
he
you
was.
see, BT3
But
Cranium.
yeah, so they were running Master to Disciple because that is another option.
Yeah,
That is a Royal Knights traded option that has the delay ability, so it's going into the battlefield, and that would then trigger King Drazel's ability to gain you memory. And it actually would gain you memory if you have enough Drazels underneath, which you reasonably should by like turn 2 or turn 3, because the option only costs 2. And King Drazel's giving you, with all of the Drazels underneath them, 3 memory for using the option, which turns Royal Knight's Purge into a 3 cost instead of a 6 cost. Um,
the
but
only thing about that is, you only get the Evo with like you don't get the Digi Evolution thing unless you go into like Jesmon. So
no,
after
you
your
you you
Omnimon turn.
basically hold that to basically make a better Jesmon GX or Examon type turn.
Yeah,
Like
I
that's
mean,
that's
I
the
can see
only
it.
reason why you would run it is to A, gain the memory, and B, make your Omnimon turn stronger, because that's what all second Meppa is doing, is it's an unsuspend. Like it
You
is just
also
a
got to
3
get
cost
a red source
unsuspend.
on the board that so you'd have to have Marcus or a
Yeah,
red
that's the only
Digimon on the
catch,
board.
is you have to have Marcus, but like that's why the decks that would run it would run more Marcus, because running more Marcus means you have more removal for the floodgates that you can't deal with otherwise. And like that's why Porcupamon is also pretty good. Not saying you should run 3 cost options, but compared to, because I was looking it up out of sheer curiosity, compared to all of the other Digimon that have an on play to delete a Digimon, Porcupa is just cost effective, the cheapest and most efficient card. Because as far as like the big other ones, you have Starmons, but you need to have enough bodies on the field to make Starmons even work. Then you also have, God, I'm blanking. You have the promo Agumons. So you
Yeah,
have the
just
Survive
deleted
promo.
3K.
Yeah, you have the Survive promo, and then you also have the promo 01.
Mm-hmm.
But the Survive promo needs Marcus on the field, and then the promo 01 costs 5. Then you also have a Devimon that deletes a level 3. So
Yeah,
there
the
are
old one.
cards, but they're just not as effective as Porcupa.
This could potentially delete 2, so I think this is just better because on play and on delete, Porcupamon will delete or level
Yeah,
3
but like he could have ran, instead of Congo, a red option,
to
and
run Fireball. I don't like it, but you could.
I mean just anything to try to help delete, because I think like there's just already enough passive stall in the deck to where the Congo doesn't matter as much. I'm not the player. He obviously had some great success with it. Um, So I'm not discrediting that at all. I'm just saying, like, if going forward we're going to be seeing more floodgates, you're going to have hop off of Congo and into more removal options.
One thing I could see it maybe is maybe in the security control matchup, this is just an auto win. If you can get Congo off while you're doing your big
Yeah,
Omnimon play,
I
this is
think
basically an auto win if
yeah,
you
I
do get
think
it.
he was too. This player might have been too afraid of security control, because like you do also kind of just lose to options that like remove your Digimon in general, and this just makes it a little bit harder. And again, against security control, it is just an auto win, because you play your Omnimon for free, spit out 5 bodies, turn off options, and then they can't heal. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think maybe that was the idea. Maybe with that plus the Alphamon to stop earlier get decks like Blue Flare and things like that. I think maybe that was the intention. Which I mean, clearly it worked. He made it very far in the tournament, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it did
Yeah.
work, so I can't say anything. He did good.
So hopping a little bit over to some of the previous decks, I do think that the Blue Flare player had a
Played against
really
this guy.
good. He had a really good tech, um, like he had a good tech lineup because the Sorais for any blue deck I think at this in this meta is like borderline mandatory because of Shine. Sorais will turn off Marcus from being able to attack, and then that stalls them for a turn, so they can't do anything. Plus, you're stripping them of their sources. So if you could hit the the rise, then that turns off Marcus being safe to swing with and having him go into security. So it's like Sorai is just absolutely huge. And then the other big tech is Decker. Decker is absolutely one of the most important cards in the Belfermon matchup, more specifically, just because
Mm-hmm.
of the stun. It does extend over onto the
Rage mode.
Belfermon player's turn, so it turns their rage mode off from being able to attack while having armor purge, so that way you could also have your level 5 live through the board wipe that Belfermon is playing with. So I think like it is just a very smart tech and inclusion.
I think it'll be almost necessary for them if they even want a chance against that matchup.
Yeah, because like the funny thing about Belthamon is even though he says he's unaffected by options, he still gets those status effects even though he's
Oh yeah, the
ignoring them.
lingering stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
the lingering stuff he still gets, like Shinegrave Rune mode and all that. This still will affect him coming into your turn.
yes. So Decker is one of those lingering type of effects that goes into the opponent's turn, so it turns the rage mode off from even being able to attack. So I think like the Blue Flare player definitely had some really good techs, and that's just another example on how your techs are really important. And the other big thing to note about the Blue Flare player is the fact that they're not running the Kazuha and the Shout 7 Superior. I've been already kind of like vehement on that is not the optimal way to play the deck. It is more of a fun gimmick rather than something that's actually effective. And as we've seen with all of these top Blue Flare players in the past format and the top Blue Flare player in this format, that statement is true. It is just a
I
gimmick.
don't
It is not the
see.
go-to.
I don't think it's necessarily true because I think the X7 Superior gives you an out to things that you normally don't have an out to.
No, but you
Um,
should be aggressive enough where you shouldn't need the out.
yeah, but if you run into a, let's say, Machine Dramon, you just lose, essentially, if you don't have X7 Superior. X7 Superior is basically your way to deal with that.
Yeah,
Decks
but
that have
it's
that ultra
too
protection and can't deal you that you can just redirect and things like that. Black or gray X7 Superior is the ultimate deterrent
like
of
I
that.
think I think it's just too cumbersome for the deck. Like it obviously people have made it work and there are lists out there, but in terms of successful lists, that is far fewer than a more traditional blue flare, and I think that's going to be doubly so in this type of a format because like we're seeing less Machine Dramon because Machine Dramon's
Oh yeah.
getting more bad matchups than good matchups. He's
Hmm.
still a fantastic deck, and obviously he's still topping, but I think he just is seeing significantly less play due to popularity, the lack of any new and meaningful tools into this format, and then obviously the matchup spread isn't the most conducive for him. So I think like
Yeah.
as the blue flare player, being able to take a read on your bad matchups is something you'd have to understand when teching your deck. And like how I teched my deck for Machine German last format, and then I didn't see any. Sure, my tech didn't help the matchup I was bad against, but it helped the matchups I wasn't bad against, and it actually made my deck better, which was kind of the weird thing. I was just like, oh, okay. And I think like that type of sentiment is still kind of true here. Like that's why
Yeah.
red hybrids is still topping as well. That
Correct.
deck is just one of the best pure aggro decks that we have.
Yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix. Why would you? It does exactly what it needs to do. Hit your opponent hard and very fast. And
Yeah,
sometimes more often than not, that's just enough.
And then transitioning over into the Nests regional.
Hmm.
This was a Spanish regional. I don't know if it was actually Spain or if it was Mexico Spanish. But regardless, they had a regional. I think it was like actual Mexico esque. I
It is, yeah. It's Mexico.
But anyway, this is the one where this is the result people really kind of wanted to see and were expecting more of compared to the other two, where there was a little bit less deck diversity. There was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there was one less deck able to top than some of the others because the others both had 9. Even though there was a lot of repeating decks, there's still a lot of repeating decks here. But the fact that 9 Shine Greymons topped this event, that's kind of like the see, I knew it kind of mentality that people were like waiting to dogpile Shine for.
See, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say that this is conducive because this could just be this event. Um, Seeing as the other events were nowhere near as bad.
I mean, it was 5 and then 5 from TAC, and then it was only 3 from the largest one. So,
Yeah, are the
like,
one that we participated in. So I still don't think it's as bad as people think it is. I
I don't
think
think
this
so
is just an
either.
outlier. I think this is just a very big outlier.
I mean, it will
Um,
skew the data for whatever people are actually looking at, but still, it
that is
does
true.
feel like an outlier. But as far as the different decks, there was 8 decks able to top, 9 Shine, 1 Hunter, 1 Belfer, 1 Red Hybrid, 1 Royal Knights, 1 Bloom Lord, 1 Greymon Tribal, more specifically focused around Wargrey, and then the
Awesome.
Cross Hearts was the big shakeup for this event in terms of like actually managing
See
to
if
get
there was
into the
anything
top
different.
16. But I like the fact that Cross Hearts made it in because it wasn't bad. Like nothing made the deck significantly worse, and if anything, because of how Shine plays, it actually is better as like more of that like aggro-esque deck in terms of how it utilizes its low end into an explosive high end.
Such what an interesting list. I'm looking. I mean, there's not too much that's different, but
No,
like
it's
running
more. It definitely is more Shout Superior focused. Because that's why they're running the Shout DXs,
the
which
watch,
I
they're
think is
also
a good
running
card.
the what is this card? The Don Doc, whatever the heck this thing is, Don Dokomon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
this
one of
guy as an
Dundokumon.
extra target, another
Yeah,
cross heart target. I mean, I like it. I mean, they're also running King version from 12
I mean,
to get the
yeah.
free Taiki.
So they're running more geared towards the idea on utilizing Shoutmon Cross 7 Superior mode, but like for the most part, it's still just a Cross Hearts deck. Like you have all of the Cross Hearts core, which is like your
Yeah,
aggro, your hyper aggro low end, and then it's just catered more towards trying to utilize
ex-
its high end a little bit better with 7 Superior, because 7 Superior even right now can still be very hard to deal with for a lot of decks.
it is a level 7, and it's a level 7 with a lot of sources. It's it's a big body. He swings. He turns off all security options. He'll hit 2 checks. He's massive. He restands and is a blocker. I mean, he basically is the embodiment of a boss monster. Does everything in one,
Yeah,
and then automatically will essentially, no matter what, get rid of a singular body on the board. Which is, I mean, awesome on its own. So, I
yeah.
mean,
And then as far as the actual top 16 breakdown, Shine did end up winning this event. Second place was Belfamon again.
yes, sir.
Third place was Shine. Fourth place was Red Hybrids. Fifth was Hunters. Sixth was Royal Knights. Seventh was
Mm.
Blooms. Eighth was War Greymon. Ninth was Shine. Then we have Shine, Cross Hearts, Shine, 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 all the way down to 16. So I mean, it was an event, and kudos to all the players between all of the different events for having some decent success. I just want to take a look at the Belfamon list to see if this is a little bit less greedy. I think this definitely is a little less greedy than the other one.
Now,
This is
this looks a
playing it
little bit
more
more
safe.
standard.
Yeah, this looks way more standard, and it looks like it's playing a little bit more safer.
Not a
I think
fan
they
of the
are kind of
Porcupa.
greedy on the level threes, but
Not a big fan of the Porcupa, but I can see why they'd want it. It's an extra blocker.
Yeah, plus
I
the on play to just mill helps fill up your trash, and you want
well,
your Gizumons in there, and you want your rage modes in there. I just don't like it for this type of a deck, just because of the fact that like I
you
want
don't want to
to.
trash. I want to control what I'm
I
putting
want to
in the
control.
trash.
Yes, the control is definitely a huge aspect, and I also think that the tempo blocker, the one drop 5K, it just helps
Hmm.
you get into Asta a little bit easier. Plus, it's a cheap and it's literally a cheap Evo, so
Yeah,
it's
Devimon is where I lean, but I can kind of see why you'd want this. It helps you still fill your trash. Uh maybe hit those Gizumons, or maybe get a card that maybe like a Kurata in your trash, or the rage mode. Because sometimes that ended up being a lot of my downfall when I played, just not seeing one or the other, sleep or rage.
yeah, and I think
Um,
that's why they were running the Tapir
Underworld,
instead of
Taper.
the Floodgate, is because you have better on delete synergy, and then on top
I
of
think
that,
that's very greedy, though. To be fair,
you're drawing a card for it, which yes is helping the consistency, but sometimes you get stuck in situations, especially against certain matchups, where you're not actively discarding, like not hardcore. You're still drawing and you're still discarding, but sometimes you'll get stuck in these situations where you just need to get a card out of your hand, and then that will put a card into your hand. So it is kind of a weird choice, but I would probably have run Electmon instead at that point, but that's just
I would
me.
either run Taper. If I was gonna run Taper, I would just trade that for like Labramon or
Labra
something.
would be
So at
good.
least I'm drawing and trashing a card. So I'm not like, I want to never plus. I just want. Well, this I guess technically isn't a plus because you're playing it. Then you have to. It has to
It
die
is a
in order
net
for you to
neutral.
draw. So I guess technically it's not a plus. I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, but it worked for him. So I guess I can't say it didn't work, but I'm
Yeah.
just not a big fan of it.
And then obviously part of Bloomlord's success is the new tools that it has gotten from the Rosemon stuff, because unfortunately Rosemon by herself is not anywhere near as competitive as
Well, this
Bloomlord.
is like a
Um,
mix of them both though. It's
this
using
this
both.
list more specifically is more of a mix, which is why I'm highlighting it versus the others, because I did previously look at the others
I
and they
did too.
weren't
Yeah,
they weren't literally doing anything spicy. It was literally, hey, let's throw Lalamon in, and then let's
and
throw
then the
Yoshino
sunflower.
in, and then maybe the Sunflower, just because it still kind of works with both. So like it was borrowing just a little tiny bit from Rose. This one more specifically is like, hey, I actually could use Rose. I don't think Rose is bad. It's just she needs more help, which we already know she's going to be getting later. And she's still not going to be competitive compared to Bloomlord, just because
No,
Bloomlord is just absolutely super absurd in terms of how strong it is.
the value that Bloomlord gives you is just beyond absurd compared to. I mean, you could just look at the text between the two cards, and
I mean,
you
one's a
can
rare and one's a
immediately tell.
super rare. Like, I think, like, Rosemon, because, like, in BT13, the set's design, all of the main line level 6s were all rares for accessibility's sake, and then the super rares were the burst modes. So they're not going to give you a, like, I mean, they could have,
Thing
but
is, like, I could look at like the Shine Gray rare, and that to me completely overshines this rare. Like,
oh, it's
that
definitely
Shine
one of the
Greymon is
weaker ones.
absurdly way better than this. Like,
Even the
this level
Mirage
6
is better
sucks.
than, yeah, even the Mirage I would think is better than this, but like it's
Like, it's
whatever.
okay. You unsuspend. That's probably like the best thing about this. And then you suspend something else, which I mean is fine.
It's
But
adding
like,
the control element that like the deck kind of just doesn't really have, because that's why you're relying so much on the Pamumon, is so you could get it out, suspend it to suspend something else. So if you don't have the Pamumon and you still need to try to suspend something, then you have the Rosemon to do it, and then that opens up a
mhm,
burst mode play. Um, Even though like if you could still just digivolve into this and it's fine.
essentially the same exact thing. So I kind of, I don't know. I'm not a big fan
I
of
do
it, but
think Quartz is a little bit better, but like the point is the new stuff
it's
that
different.
Rosemon had is what's helping Bloomlord stick around.
And oh yeah, definitely the supporting pieces, like Sunflower and Lala being another searcher, and then also the inheritables to reduce the cost of an Evo. I mean, that those two effects alone are just absurdly strong. Like
Yeah, and
that
then we
is
have
insane.
a lot of other data to take a look at. So I'm just going to flip the screen and pull in the other data because in the PPG event, we actually did get somebody who compiled a ginormous data spread for us. So this is the number of games, and then the percentage of games where that deck won. So it gives us actually like a determination on how strong certain decks are. Granted, this is only for one event, even though the one event was 8 rounds, 414 players, so it's a pretty sizable event to pull data from. But this is just one event after all. It would be
Yeah.
nice to see how this person continues to compile the data because I would like to see one for each of the events, and then I want to see a mega one where it's like, oh, I have it. I have the spread for all of the different events. So let me compile them all into just one mega one.
That would be super cool. I would like to see that after like a good chunk of the events have happened, just for them to be like, okay, we're gonna take all six arbitrary number of events, plug them all together, and see what the results are like. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this guy does it, or someone takes the reins and does it.
So as far before I get into like the nitty gritty of like the charts and trying to verbally explain it while also for the video watchers visually show it, I kind of have my own little running set of data. I'm not going to talk about like the numbers specifically, but basically I just am looking at what the best 5 decks are in this format. And right now, the top 5 decks are Shine Greymon, they are Royal Knights, Bloom Lord, War Greymon, and then what was the last one? I already forgot.
Shangri Red Hybrid? Did you
No,
say
it's
that
definitely
already?
not Red Hybrid. It's in my meta channel. So it is. Oh, Hunters. So
Okay.
Shine Greymon, Bloom Lord, Royal Knights, Hunters, and Greymon. Those are your current top 5 decks for this format. And I think like with this chart, you could easily find it on the main Digimon Facebook page if you really wanted to. If you're also in my Discord, it's in there as well. But this chart kind of gives some like really interesting data to look at in terms of like the actual strength of the deck, because some of it is kind of weird, and then some of it is kind of like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But like at the end of the day, if we just take a look objectively about it, not a lot of these matchup spreads are that bad. Like a lot of these decks, I don't think the worst one, yeah, the worst one doesn't even dip under 40%. So like having a good matchup spread in terms of like what is what is playable versus each other, having a deck be like at worst 40-60 is still not that bad. Like
No, I think it's not even close to being that bad.
the closer you get to 50% is kind of what you want, and the fact that we have so many strong decks that are still hovering around that like at least bare minimum 40-60 according to this is what I would say pretty decent. Are you going to be favored all the time? No, but that's just normal.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, you can't. Not every list is going to be that like favored, which is fine. That's not realistic to have that expectation. But I think this is a decent little tool to get a kind of a glimpse. I wouldn't say I would take this with a grain of salt because some of this is a little bit weird, but like for the most part, it's pretty solid and it's a good like representation or of the very first like big tournament that they show here,
Yeah,
and
because oh, go ahead.
um, and it's helpful. It's good to have that little bit of insight to see, oh, maybe let me see, maybe this gives me a little bit of push to try a deck that I have been looking at, didn't really want to take the plunge. I see the data, I see Bloom Lord's doing fairly well into some of these matchups. Maybe give it a shot. And then, you try and do what you do there. But once again, I take a lot of this with a grain of salt because some of it is a little wonky.
Yeah, that's probably because it's only one isolated event. Um,
Exactly.
And like, but according to even like their representation, the top 5 decks are Royal Knights, Bloomlord, Alphamon, Hunters, Greymon, and Shine Greymon. Like those that is this chart's top 5 decks. Do I agree with some of them? No. I think Alphamon is good, but I think Alphamon is kind of an outlier. But the people who've been playing Alphamon apparently have been doing really well with him, and he has a pretty okay matchup spread, except for Royal Knights, which I would think is kind of weird. But I guess if they just turn off your attacks, it's whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I guess
That's
it
why
kind
like
of.
some of this is kind of wonky, where it's just like, oh yeah, Royal Knights has a 60% win rate against the vast majority of decks. It has a couple of like hard losses or hard negs, but like they're also understandable on where the negative like their losses come from and how they get there. But the fact that like, oh, according to this, if Royal Knights is that strong, it should be, you know, A, played more, and B, have more representation in the top. And the fact that it doesn't, like, I know some people will be like, oh, but it's an expensive deck. You could probably build like like a decent version of the deck for about 150. And then like if you're trying to be hyper super competitive, you could probably build the full thing for about 200. Probably a little bit less than 200. But if you're a competitive player, price is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You're going to pay what you need to get what you need to play the
Yeah,
best
to
deck.
get the best chance of winning. It doesn't. Most people, when it comes to the competitive, will that it does not matter. You'll put any amount of dollar so
Right.
that you get the best chance of winning.
But the fact that
So
this data is showing us like, oh, Royal Knights is by this data the best deck by a decently sized margin, like 10%, 7%, even 6% above like some of the others is like, oh, interesting. Um but Shine obviously being the slightly cheaper deck, more people like the protagonist rather than the antagonist, and
I
the
mean,
the
you know how it
strength
is.
and versatility of Shine is probably why a lot of people are on them. So like if we look at some other numbers, Shine is the number one represented deck, followed by Greymon and all of its variants, and then Mirage and Royal Knights are the next leading ones.
I think that makes sense. I mean, Shine, Mirage, and Royal, they're just the new hot thing. So, and they're also a very strong deck. So that makes sense. The Greymon, I mean, it's Greymon. Everybody loves Greymon. Whether it be your Black War Greys, Gaios, etc., etc. Greymon.deck. I mean, they compile them all into one list, so hence why it shows all. Which, I mean, it makes sense. It's protagonist Digimon. Everybody loves Greymon. Yada yada yada. Uh,
The one thing I've
so
been thinking about though is because I generally play decks that don't lose to security control, like those are my favorite aggro decks, is decks that like, yeah, I could push the damage and not lose to security control. Because security control keeps decks like Mirage and All Force kind of in check. Depending on how many security control players are around, I really just wish the deck would die. I know it's not realistically going to die, especially not after BT14, but that's in the future. And we're talking about the now. I think like a deck like security control in this type of a format is going to have a very hard time. The data kind of shows that it's having a hard time, and it's not necessarily because the deck is like that good, because I've already talked about this deck to death and why I don't like it and how to play against it, and I generally don't have a problem playing into it because I already know how to play against it. Um, but it is there to kind of keep like these big combo heavy OTK decks in check, and then Shine just kind of ignores that because you're punching with Marcus. And then what's the worst that they're gonna do? Send Marcus to security? Oops, he already wants to go there anyway.
yeah, I don't think they. I don't think they care all that much. I'm gonna make the assumption they don't care all that much,
Yeah,
which I mean is fine. That's just how it is.
but
Oh,
I think like the spread of all of the different decks that we're seeing, because like there's what, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19. The fact that there's 19 different decks, probably more that people like from the other events and from future events, like 19 decks that people are playing is a pretty good spread, even though only about 60% of them are actually topping.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good if you ask me. I mean, and this is, mind you, this is the very beginning of the format. More people are more willing to try the newer decks and see how they, play into the older ones. Some people, the outliers will end up sticking with what's more comfortable for them, which is understandable. Hence why you see like a lot of Blue Flare, a lot of Bloom Lord, Greymon Toolbox, things like that. Um, so once again, look at these numbers with a tiny bit of salt, um, just because this can change. This will change going forward. We don't know how this will be. We have an indication of what we think is going to be solid, and we will think stay solid just because of we've seen it. And some JP, we don't necessarily only look at the JP stuff,
JP
but
data, I think, for this set specifically is completely irrelevant because they had the Rising Wind set before we
they had
did.
that. They had the
They had
boost,
promos, the training cards. They had a
yep.
lot more than what we are working with.
And I still think even if you're looking at that, like Shangri and Mirage were still doing good with those cards. So like them being decent right now still shows that those decks are very strong, and they only get better as we continue going forward. So I that's my takeaway from JP at least. Everything else is kind of, we're in our own territory because we have a different format. There's cards that they did not have. They did not have the ace cards. We do. I'm sure that it's not very much different, since I'm gonna make the assumption a lot of these decks are not using them, excluding maybe the Greymon one.
No, none
But
of the Gray. I'll spoil this right now. None of the Greymon decks are playing Greymon
like
Ace. None of them.
I'll make a good assumption they're probably not using them, so we'll just have to continue to leave that be the case, which is fine. But you never know; those cards might come up. Some people might find a very obscure use. The NA people, or I should say well, I guess NA, yeah, this side of the world likes to innovate very hard with some stuff, or they like to, either one of things happen: they innovate really hard, or they optimize very hard. One or the other.
Well, you're
So
forgetting about the miscellaneous third one, and they meme very hard.
that too, yes, that is also a very big thing. Hence, I have some things.
I mean, that's kind of like, at this point, I kind of think Millith is kind of just in that meme territory. I think like the cuteness of it has already worn off, and like a lot of these like top decks are kind of aggressive enough where it's just like, cool, I don't care about you milling my deck. I already have everything I need. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think just like that's hitting meme territory. In my perspective, I could be completely wrong, and I'd love to be shown to be wrong, but I think Millith had its rise to fame, and now it's on the decline. And I don't think the training boosts in BT14 are going to change that, because the original JP list that the deck was formed from was using those. It'll help speed things up, but I don't think it's ultimately going to matter.
No, I think it doesn't have. It's not bad. I don't think the deck is bad at all, but I think it's falls into the purple conundrum where the good pilot will have to pilot it in order for it to be good. Which it's also dramatically harder to play it because it has a lot of bad matchups, especially right now. Has a lot of bad matchups. So maybe it might steal the top here or there, but I don't foresee it happening too often. Um, but you never know. I guess it could, but I don't. I don't foresee that due to these aggro decks being so absurdly strong, or too fast is what I should say. That they
Yeah,
don't give it a chance to really get the ball rolling.
yeah. And I know this is just the beginning of the format.
Correct.
So like with it being the beginning of the format and already learning from your mistakes on what I presume to be your main deck, um, I'm assuming Belphemon is going to be your main deck for this format. Like,
That is correct. You would be very correct. I think that deck is so absurdly good, and I think the matchups that it's bad with, you can play it into them and play around them and not care. Your
I mean,
Shine Gray matchup is solid. Like, I really don't lose to Shine Greymon all that often, unless I just break very badly or I don't see pieces, which can happen. But more often than not, you it's a 50-50, maybe 55-45 if you want to be very generous to the Shine Gray player, but I think it's not bad. And a lot of the matchups that you have that are you would say quote unquote bad, like Blue Flare and things like that, they have to play around you. They
well,
can't. You don't have to play around them. They have to play around you.
well,
So it's
according to the data from the chart, that matchup specifically is 38 for 38-52, or my math is probably wrong. 58-62. That's it. So it is more in Shine's favor, and I think like that's part of the trick of it. Is like, I'm not discrediting the deck at all. But I think if you do just know what the deck is doing and know how to play around it, like, yes, you do have to accommodate for the fact that that is a Belphemon. But I think with like that same type of mentality as security control, if you know how to play against it, I don't think it's actually that bad.
I
Like,
think
in
it's
terms of
not
like
that
being
bad.
able to play around it.
I think you're correct in that assumption. But if it's earlier in the game, sometimes it's very easy for like the deck, if you start off very well, even with just like a sleep in hand and a rage in trash, like turn 2, because that's not something that's far fetched. It's very simple to do. That alone will make it so it's near impossible for an opponent to do anything. Like,
if you have the nuts, you have the nuts. Like,
thing is, that's
there's
not
no
even really the nuts. Like, that's not even that hard to do. Like, turn 2 or 3 having the setup is not that hard to do because of how much you turbo into your stuff. Like, that's what I mean by, like, I find it very hard for you to like get to that excess of 6 plus cards, hit the 7, unless you're actively trying to keep cards in hand, because you can force things to happen. You can just slam stuff down, and it doesn't matter if they die or not, because you just want to keep your hand count low. So
I mean,
that's why I find it hard to say, like, to believe, like, or at least to see it. Now, of course, if I saw it, that's a different story. I just from going from experience. So this is just my experience over what you've seen. So what you've seen, you say that these things happen, and it's not. I mean, it's not far fetched, especially if they're going against like Mirage and things like that, where they're bouncing the stuff to
according to the
hand.
data, the Mirage is like a hard L. Like, you're just
It is a
eating that.
very hard matchup. It is a very, very hard matchup.
Like,
if you see one rage, then you're probably okay in the middle if you're earlier in the game. But if you let it get to like mid to late, you're done. You just lose. There's nothing you can do unless you see the option in your security and you hope that you have the level 7 in hand. That's realistically your only way out. Other than that, you just auto lose if they get into that mid game, late game spike.
Yeah,
Or if they do it the opposite, if they see it too early, then you just lose.
because I was on Mirage, and I'll probably flip-flop every now and then, but I'm not doing a whole lot of, like, hardcore competitive because I already have my invite, so a lot of it would be more, like, softcore just for, like, practice and understanding, rather, like, more data gathering rather than me try-harding to extra try-hard. But
Me and
from
Zach are already signed up for all of them, so we're going to be trying hard.
believe me, I would be too. I 100% would be too. But regardless, like, I was on Mirage. I'll probably still be on Mirage. I put up a poll to see if people want me to swap off of a deck and try something else.
You should look at the option for other. You should look at that one.
Oh, I mean, you're saying Belphemon.
I'm gonna be the only one posting it.
But like, I felt like when I was playing my last event as Mirage, there were some things that I really took notice And like this comes down to like not necessarily deck building error, but like just the lack of understanding on where the meta currently is because it is just so fresh. Like I felt like my Mirage list, while it was fine and functionable, could have been more optimized for the environment I was playing in. And I definitely think one of the biggest things is the Digitama for Mirage. I think because we don't have good ways and good access at jamming all the time, we have to rely on Nikolai, but the deck doesn't have that much space to give for Nikolai. Like we have to rely
one or two max.
Yeah, you have to
Yes.
rely more on DP. So I'm probably going to be swapping off of the draw egg and going with the starter deck Vmon to try to have more DP to be able to clear certain thresholds that I need to clear. And I felt like if I had done that to begin with, I would have had way more success. And if I had been more practiced and seasoned on various matchups, because my brother, he's probably going to be playing Belfmon. And
Nice.
yeah, he didn't have his deck completely built yet. So I couldn't get that matchup data in, which ultimately harmed me against the person who won the event because that was a match I 100% had lethal, and I did not understand the matchup to get to the lethal state, so he killed me in response. So that was partially player skill error, but like that's where practice and understanding and figuring out the meta definitely helps propel a deck forward, because I honestly felt like the pacing I was at that point, I was on good pace to again make top 16, but I flubbed it because I didn't have all of the knowledge that I wanted going into it. But I gained that knowledge post playing, which is why I'm a huge fan of rapid iteration. Like, I don't stick on trying to force something to work long enough to know it's not going to. I'll see it's not working from the get-go, and instead of trying to continue to force it, I will just hop off of it and try something else.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there. I think that's a good mentality to have when it comes to learning new stuff and things like that. I think you kind of have to have that mentality if you want to get better at the game.
I mean, it comes from my schooling, because I went to a design school to, design card games. Not that I'm doing a whole lot of that now, thanks COVID. Um, but one of the biggest lessons that could be applied to pretty much almost anything is fail fast and fail often. So even though we hate failure, that's how we learn and that's how we grow. I would never have known that the draw egg Wanyamon from BT11 was not good for this environment had I not been playing in the environment. And even though it sounds like a good egg, and it probably still is a good egg because it did help get me out of some sticky situations when I was aggressing with my low level Digimon, but I think like the value of the plus 1000 was something I noticed more often than the draw. And that was my big takeaway, and kind of why I stopped. Like, I could have finished the event and still had like a good enough record to probably squeeze into top 64, but I gave up because I already learned what I needed to learn. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to change up my deck and adapt for the next event.
That's essentially the same exact thing. I'm very glad I did very bad this tournament, honestly, because then I understood more how to play against certain matchups. I understood it was a big learning curve for me. So I'm very happy that this tournament didn't go well for me and I didn't just do outright amazing out the gate, because then I wouldn't have learned a lot of things like against Shine Gray and things like that. Because my only win was to Shine Gray. And that was I lost a round that I could have won had I known an effect that was not mandatory in Shine Gray's arsenal. And that was solely the Agumon from this set, and I guess inclusive the Geo Gray from this set. How they delete a 3000 DP Digimon or less. That is not. It is not mandatory. That is a choice. They can choose to do that. had I known that was the case, then I would have changed my play, and then a lot of things would have went. That game would have went different. I would have just steamrolled him the second game, and then uh, continued over. And then my losses, I'm happy because I know that it was not me who I was playing against. It was solely due to player error. After re-looking, because I recorded my matches and I wanted to watch and see what I did wrong, how I could have played out of them better. Um, so I'm very happy that this tournament did not go well for me, so that I could learn more of what I could do to be better.
There were definitely a lot of things that I could do better in my own plays. Like against the Belfamon player, I tried to line up a very cute and cheeky Sorai, and then his Karadas kind of just absolutely ruined my day because I was going into a naked Belfamon rage, so I was just like, cool, I'll just use Sorai to turn it off, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to use Karada to shove it underneath, and I was just like,
Yep.
God dang it. But otherwise, if Karada was not there, that play would have worked. But I totally forgot about Karada. Like, that's where just understanding
Yeah,
matchup
and things like that.
knowledge is super, super important. On top of making sure you have the right text. Because, again, that Sorai that was teched more specifically for Shine and for Royal Knights can sometimes have unique and interesting applications in other matchups that you might not even be aware of. And you could be more aware of it through just understanding the matchups. And I know this is like way easier said than done.
Oh yeah,
Way easier.
this is
But
over a long period of time, a lot of playing, a lot of testing, a lot of practicing. So I mean, it's not something that just happens. I mean, some people it does, not to me. I know I need to be in the thick of it to really understand and learn.
as do I, which is why I do a lot of like testing at locals. Even though my locals isn't like the world's greatest testing environment, just still recognizing bare minimum play lines that you can make still helps you grow as a player. Because like I was showing my brother who is learning Belfmon, I was just like, okay, you're very clearly playing the deck wrong because it does play a little bit different. Here, let me play the deck and kind of show you the flow. And it made way more sense after I showed him how the deck is supposed to flow, how it functions as a whole, versus him trying to piece everything together like a puzzle in his own head. Sometimes, like, we all have different learning styles.
Yeah, of course.
And I know my brother's learning style, and like that's helps him. It like helps me and it helps him at the same time.
Yeah, see, I'm definitely a visual learner in that way, where like, or a physical learner. I have to be doing whatever it is. You could show me it, and for the most part, I'll get a gist of it. But until I get my hands on it and I'm actually like doing it, for example, like these decks, hence why you see that I build every deck, not because I actually am going to play every deck, but for the sole purpose of me understanding the decks. I have every single deck, one to help people if they want to test, but then two, so I can learn what their plays are from both the low end, like crappy plays, to the best possible play. I want to know all of it so that I don't get blindsided by things. The only things that I really would get blindsided is, tech stuff that I genuinely would never have thought of. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't.
Could said it better myself because that's the type of mentality on why I build so many decks more specifically on YouTube with like playline, like basic playline breakdown, is to just try to help as best as I can possibly do. Not only just for me studying up on the deck so I know what it does so I'm not blindsided, but to inform people with the knowledge that I gained from doing the research, the homework, play testing, and all that jazz.
Yeah.
But as far as where the meta is gonna go to kind of wrap things up, where do you kind of see this meta going? Like, are there any other like decks you think are gonna be like surprise top 16s, or do we kind of already just know from here? What are your thoughts on it?
I'm I'm a little all over the place. I think we're in a good spot where there isn't. I mean, of course, we'll see Shine a lot. I think that's just a given. Um, but as in regards to other decks, I think there's so much room for growth and a lot of room for other decks to have their time, depending on what they play and who they play against and the pilots. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that can happen. I think, like I say, that people are still like on this train of, I don't know why they think, but like Belphemont is very, very good. I think it's a deck that will, the good pilots will make it all the way to the top as shown through these tournaments. It just is hard to play. But I also think a deck like Crossheart has a lot of room to be up there, and I them not seeing, like in this particular tournament, was it the Nests one? There wasn't a lot of, I guess, Greymon decks, or at least specifically the Greymon Tribal and things like that. So they had this Crossheart player probably had a field day and was able to get that early aggro and stuff. And I really like his list a lot.
I mean,
Um,
that comes from like reading the meta because like as we shown with the data, like a lot of these decks, it's not like super hard of a loss most of the time. Like your average matchup spread is really close to like 50-50 or 40-60. So like I know we haven't seen Beelzemon. I know there's like a lot of the other BT12 decks and even BT11 decks that we haven't seen that much of, but like that doesn't mean that they can't. And I think like this is kind of where we are in like a self-fulfilling prophecy type of a position where it's just like, okay, we see Shine is topping the most, so a lot more people are going to be on Shine, and then Shine's going to top even more because they're seeing Shine win, so they want to play the
I
winning
mean,
deck, and that's a vicious cycle that feeds into itself. And I think like if we take a step back and some players on older decks experiment and iterate and adapt, even some of those older decks from 2-3 formats ago could still do well. Like heck, Alphamon literally is playing almost the exact same deck he has been since BT9. Just now he has the new Doru tools to be able to go back and use
yeah,
the deck's Doru tools.
it's
And
just
now
one
he's
new line.
yeah, and now he's finding success again. It's not even a new line. The decks are literally just using that card and the new Alphamon. And like they have to use Sunarizamon just as filler for the security tech plus that it's lacking, but it's not like the
I
inheritables
think a
were
lot
doing
of them are
much
using
anyway.
the new level 4. They're using the new level 4 and the new level 5. The level 3 from the set is garbage.
The
But
level 4 is kind of garbage. Like the best thing about it is it's a 4 drop.
that's the main reason I think people are using it. And I also think it the all turns. I mean, it's essentially the same exact thing as the old one, but that 4 drop matters a lot because sometimes in this deck you have to play. I will say you have to play greedy. Like your level threes, you're running less level threes than normal. Um, like for example, this list that's in the PBG one, he's running only 10 for a 10.
I would not
Um,
even like mulligans aside, I would never run less than 12
I don't
unless
think
like
so.
my
I
deck
think he's
actually can
wrong,
get away with it.
but I think he's running like Final Zubagon Punch, and
Yeah, he's using the space for more tech options.
which is fine. I don't like having less than 12, but that's just me. He did well with it, so clearly there's some merit, which just goes to show Cool Boy, consistency of Cool Boy. Cool Boy is still a ridiculous card. Um, it's just easier to deal with, but there's still not that much tamer hate that is widespread. So it's
No,
like,
but like going back to the point, it's like as long as you're willing to go back to a deck, you're willing to put in the time, effort, and iterate, you're good at being able to read the direction of the meta. That can carry you very far. Like that, that's almost solely the attribute that I can say to my success getting my invite was because I knew my worst matchup, if I didn't see, I was golden against literally everything else. And that sentiment was exactly what happened. I didn't see any of my bad matchups, and I beat the one that I did see, and it wasn't that negative because it wasn't Machine Dramon. And I had good success with it because I was a good pilot on that deck. I had a good meta read, and I teched properly to be able to accommodate it. And I think a lot of these older decks, if you do follow those three things, you could do very well.
I hard agree.
But that is going to be all of the time that we have. I want to thank everyone again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, please make sure to share it on social media with everyone else, on top of leading a follow, a like, a rating, a review. Do all of the social media usual stuff depending on what platform you're actually listening on. So I want to thank everyone again, and we will see you in the next episode.